Jack Fulton, it's a real honor, a real privilege, and a pleasure to have you here today at the Canadian Lacrosse Hall of Fame at the Anvil Center in New Westminster, part of our series called Lacrosse Talks. Jack, you've had such a long and storied career in lacrosse at every conceivable level of the game, including the Lacrosse Hall of Fame, which we're going to talk about in a while. Where did it all begin? Where were you born and when? And maybe tell us about your early years.
Well, I was born in 1926, and I lived on 7th Avenue in the West End of New Westminster, 2 doors from Grumpy Spring, who was the coach of the Salmon Bellies at the time. And that family had all the equipment, baseball, lacrosse, whatever you wanted. In fact, he even built a building in the back of his yard next door so they could play ball hockey in there. So that's where I got my initial interest. And I attended my first game in 1936 against Richmond. And the Salmon Bellies won by away that night. And then I always had carried on my interest. When I was away during the war, I used to get my sister to send me all the write-ups on lacrosse. So when I came back after the war, the Salmon Bellies and lacrosse was kind of at a bit of a downer at that time until they amalgamated the Salmon Bellies and the Adanacs and called them the Commandos. Well, that didn't work. The Adanacs sat in one corner of the dressing room and the Salmon Bellies sat in the other. So they didn't go anywhere. You know, they made the playoffs, but that's all they did. And then in '53, when the junior team came up, they went through the whole year without losing a game, went back east to Long Branch, won the first 2 games easily, and then they made the mistake of going to a banquet in Brampton, and they all got sick from the food, and so they canceled 1 game or 2 games, and then they played the next 2, but they weren't up to snuff. They lost the next 2, so now it was a 3 out of 5 at that time, and they played the 5th game, and the Salmon Bellies won. So these were the young kids that were going to be the future of the Salmon Bellies. It was going to be a new era, you know. So anyway, they started out in '54, and didn't win a lot of games. They were always leading. They played 4 periods at that time, and they'd be leading at the end of the 3rd period, and the veterans would take over, and they'd get beat. So anyway, they went through '54 and did a little better in '55 because some of the veterans came back, like Johnny Douglas played a few games for them, Bertie Houston. And then '56, they kind of dropped again. And I was talking to a friend of mine at the fire hall. I was working at the fire hall at that time, and he said, well, maybe we should go and see if we could help them out. And there was a meeting that night or the next night, I can't remember which. So I said, yeah, let's go. So I went, and he never showed up. So I said to them, it was in Wilf Hill's basement where we had the meeting, and Wilf was one of the directors of the team. And I said, oh, I'd just like to help out. So they made me the equipment manager. Well, before the year was out, I was running the team. There was just nobody there, you know. And it came down to the last game of the year, and we were playing Nanaimo in Queen's Park. And I'd brought up 3 kids from P&E Indian team, Usselman, Carey, and Gimple. And we beat Nanaimo that night. They had cinched first place. They were by far the best team. But we ended up beating them. So that kind of kept the fire alight a little bit, because I said, if we don't get more help here, I'm not going to waste my time with these guys because nobody seems to care. So as a result of working at the fire hall, Harry McKnight, who was coached the basketball team, ladies basketball team, to the Canadian Championship, I got talking to him about it, and he said, well, I might mind helping out a little bit. So him and I talked a bit together, and the Salmon Belly faction was still there, the old guard, and they didn't seem to want it. They just seemed to want it to carry on. You know, well, that wasn't what we wanted to do. So First, we ran a $50 plate dinner. And I remember one of the directors of the senior team, he said, "You guys are nuts. You'll never sell $250 tickets." Well, we did. We sold them out, so now we got some money. Well, they were of the mind at that time, you don't pay players. Well, you don't bring players in unless you're going to pay them. So the first thing we did, we went to Jake Proctor, who had been coaching the Indians but was coaching Vancouver the previous year. And yeah, he'd come. Well, Jake cost us $500. And Jake said, "Well, jeepers," he said, "you know, I'm the coach, I'm not the player. I can't do it, I got to get some players." So the first one we went after was Jack Byford. He was a good defenseman for Vancouver. And in the meantime, the Peony Indians, who had won the Minnow Cup the year before, were moving up to the senior team, and they had all kinds of players. But at that time, for $25, you could just transfer a player if you could make your case, which we did. And we brought Jack Byford over. First, we went down to Prentice, John Prentice at Canfor, and Harry gave him the pep talk, and we asked him for $500. And he said to his treasurer at the time, Pat Philly, he says, "Give these boys $1,000. So now we had a little more money. And we went to the guy from UDL. He had been a director at the team in previous years. We got $500 out of him. So now we went and we went after Mario Crema. And Mario, the fact that all these kids came up, and it was about 5 or 6 games into the season and Vancouver was winning, they thought, well, we let these old guys go. And prior to that, we got over and talked to Stan Joseph. He was the goalie of the Vancouver team. And we told him we wanted him to come and play with us. And Stan said, well, you know, yeah, you wouldn't mind coming. And we said, well, how much is Vancouver paying you? Well, just $25, he said. We said, those cheapskates, we'll give you $250. So over we came, Stan came. And it was a 30-game schedule that year. And with these players, we got a fellow named Bob Lee, who played for Vancouver. Not the Bob Lee who played for the Adanacs, but the history of him was he'd applied for the fire department for twice in Vancouver and couldn't make it. So we had an in with the chief, who was Huey Bird at that time. We got him sorted out. We got him on the Vancouver Fire Department, so he played for us that year. Never played for us again. He went back to Vancouver at the end of the year. Anyway, we won 15 and lost 15, and Nanaimo beat us out in the playoffs. And so now, in the meantime, Victoria are playing for the Mann Cup, and Jack Beyondis ready to go to camp, the Boston camp. He's a hockey player, and he figured he'd done his bit for the year, and he was anxious to get back there. So as a result of one of the games, he punched one of the referees. Well, they suspended him for the rest of the year. So we thought, well, maybe we should talk to him. So we got his address and gave him the pitch and said, would he be interested in coming to the Salmon Bellies? And he said, well, yeah, he would for a price, you know. Well, he was pretty cagey. What was your price? Well, he said, I'll tell you later. You know, well, he did tell us later.
Make me an offer kind of thing.
Make me an offer. And I looked at Harry, and Harry looked at me, and we offered him, I think, $1,500. Well, that wasn't going to do it. So anyway, he came back. He wanted $3,500.
Quite a bit of money in that.
Quite a bit of money at that time. And I looked at Harry, and he said, Jesus, where are we going to get that money? Well, we thought we got a bit of a plan together and figured we could do it. So we raised the dough, we bought him out and signed him, picked him up at the airport, and on the way back from the airport, he's rubbing his knee. And they said, what the hell's the matter with your knee? Oh, shit, he said, I didn't play the last 2 hockey games in the playoffs. He said, I got a bum knee.
So you paid $3,500
for a bum knee.
Potential bum knee.
Oh, yeah, but when we told him, look, we brought you here to score goals and win games, but we brought you to put some fans in the seats. He said, don't worry, I'll do that, you know. Well, we went over to Victoria for the first game, and course, he got booed out of the arena there, but we beat them, and then we came back here and the first game in Queen's Park and beat them 19-5. So anyway, he had a great year. He was a great guy, but he was just complimented the Cliff Sepkas and the Jack Barkleys and Ivan Stewarts and all these young kids we had, you know.
You'd gone to the team before you acquired.
We went to
Beyonda,
the
and
team
you-
and we had a meeting. We said, we have an opportunity to get this guy. We're going to have to pay him. Do you want us to try and get him? By all means, they said, should get him. So we got him. He put money in everybody's pocket because the players split. We paid all the expenses. That was the deal we made with the players. We'd pay all the travel fees. We'd pay all the expenses. But they would get all the gate receipts. So we went on that premise that we were going to bring more fans in, and we upped the price from 50 cents to $1. That helped a little bit too. So anyway, we went through the 58 season, and we won the league. And I think Nanaimo beat out Vancouver, and Nanaimo, we were playing them. And it went back and forth. We'd win at home quite easy. They'd win over there quite easy. And it came to the 6th game in Queen's Park. And geez, they were ahead of us by about 5 goals. And we gradually pecked away at them. And there was a maybe short time to go. Beyonda took a shot. And when he took a shot, when he scored, he always threw his hands up in the air like that. Well, he didn't throw his hands up in the air. But we had a guy on the goal.
The goal judge?
Goal judge at the time. And that was a guy named Cook. And he said, the ball went in the net. There's no doubt about it. So anyway, the ball went in the net, and we tied it up. And then we scored and beat them in overtime. So there, and that was the 7th game, too. It wasn't the 6th game, it was the 7th game. So then we're all gung-ho, you know. Here we were in the Mann Cup, and we were bringing this hotshot team out from Ontario. And I think we beat them 20-7 the first game. They were called the Welland-Cronin Switzens or something. So the Mann Cup was just a 4-game sweep, you know. And it was kind of a hollow victory for us at the time.
I can pause you there. Just Jack Beyonda is such a big name in Canadian lacrosse. Some say he's the best player ever, although that's always very hard to determine. Certainly he's one of the best. You knew him personally, and tell us a little bit about the way he played and the kind of individual he was in the locker room and with the other players. He was a domineering force, but what did he do that was so?
Well, he had so much charisma. When he walked into our dressing room, in 10 minutes, he had every one of them eaten out of his hand. You know, he was just that kind of a guy. You know, he would insult McCory for having big ears. And
Doug McQuarrie, the
yeah,
defenseman.
And he'd insult everybody around the room, and they'd all love it, you know. He was just such a great talent, besides having the charisma that he had. So he just played a great year. He won the scoring championship. He won the scoring championship every year. He played a full year. If he played the full season, he won. You know, and he followed the team from Victoria to Nanaimo to us. You know, and then back to Nanaimo, and that was another story, which I'll get to a little bit later. But '59 come along. Well, he needed a raise, you know, so we upped him to $4,000, and what happened was, halfway through the year, we were going to put on another dinner. So Harry and I are driving down Vancouver. We're going to Carling's to see if we get 10 dozen beer donated to for our dinner. And we passed a sign that said O'Keefe's. It was a warehouse. Well, it was dinner time, and when we went to Carling's, the sales guy wasn't there, so we went back. Let's pop in here and see if we can get 10 beer out of him. So we went in and sat down. It was a fellow named Andy Folds, who had come out from Ontario to run the ship here. And we gave him the story about, well, could we get 10 beer? Oh, sure, he'd give us 10 beer. And as the conversation went on, he said, have you ever thought about taking on a sponsor? And we said, well, we never have really. Well, how much money would you be looking for? So I looked at Harry. I said, well, how does $4,000 sign? He said, well, leave it with me. He phoned us back about 3 days later and said, you got your $4,000. We got to have a press conference. So we have a press conference down at the old King Neptune to announce that we're now the O'Keefe's lacrosse team. Well, you should have heard the foo-fa-ra that went on in town with that. You know, that we'd abandon the name and all this BS.
You're overturning 60 years of
taking
Salmon
it
Belly's
away,
history.
you know.
But the support for the team
Had-
wasn't
had
really
dwindled.
there.
It wasn't there.
And so where was the money going to come from?
Where was
right?
it going to come from? So anyway, as it turned out, there was so much negative about it. Andy phoned us up and said, look, keep the $4,000 and go back to the Salmon Bellies. And we said, not a chance, because we knew that we'd get them next year and the year after. So we got him again in '59, and that was probably Jack Beyonda's best year. He scored 74 goals and had 70 assists. He got 144 points, and Cliff Seppic was the second highest scorer, and he had 74 points. So he doubled it. I mean, he was just so fantastic. Well, then Peterborough came out. Well, they had a fairly good team. You know, they had Bobby Allen, and they had Moose Wooten and
Moon
Wooten
yeah,
in goal.
in goal.
And they had a pretty good team. But we whipped them 4 straight. But they were pretty good games, you know. They were all, they weren't really close, but they were a pretty good team. But we beat them rather handily. So anyway, now we got 2 Mann Cups under our belt. Now what are we going to do for 1960? Well, now Beyonda wants 5,000. But he was going to work for the brewery, and they were going to pick out 2,500 of it. So that was fine. So he was playing for Portland Buckaroos at the time, and I signed him to a player's, they had the player's
Certificate?
you signed at the time, and we signed him to a contract. We'd pay him $5 grand. And one time he came up and he said, you know, who was the coach in Victoria at the time?
Would it be Whitey?
No, it
Severson
wasn't
or
Whitey. Red.
Red.
Forget his last name. Anyway, he said, Red's coaching Nanaimo this year, and he's offered me a 10% share in this hotel that he's got. And I said, well, Jesus, there's about 30 hotels in Nanaimo, and they're all going broke. But he said, no, I've thought about it, and it was one day at work, we were sitting there, we were discussing this. No, I've decided I'm going to stay with you. I'm going to have to go tell Red, you know. And he walked out the door, and I said to the fellow that was with me, I said, the last guy he talks to, that's where he's going, you know. So he did. We let him go for 25 bucks. Just signed a transfer. If you want to go there. We always took the attitude, if you didn't want to play for the Salmon Bellies, you can go. Jack Barkley came to us once, that he wanted more money than we were prepared to pay. And he said, well, I'll go play for Vancouver. We said, well, go play for Vancouver. So we went over to Vancouver, one of their practices, and they didn't want him. They said they don't want him around. So he had to come back. So anyway, Beyonda played 1960 in Nanaimo. And he again won the scoring championship. They went back east that year, and they lost to the Eastern team. Forget the name of their team was. They lost 4-1, and they had a good team, you know. They had a goalie named Fred Full in goal. Restmore Freddie, they called him, because he put so much gear on. He looked like a mattress, you know. And they went back, and when they got back there, Freddie was missing Nanaimo and missing his wife and missing all this, and he wasn't playing worth a damn. So they phoned me up and said, do you think you could get Les Norman back here? I said, well, I'll try. So I went and phoned Les up. Sure, he'd go. So he went back and played the last couple of games. It turned out they didn't win anyway, so the Eastern team won. So come '61, he played for Nanaimo again. They paid him $100 a game, and he had to come from Portland, drive up, take the ferry, and go across to Victoria. So they didn't do very well that year. And in '62, about halfway through the season, I was always friendly with him. We always talked on the phone and exchanged letters and what have you. And he said to me, you know, I wouldn't mind coming back and play for the Salmon Bellies. And I said, well, you can forget the $5,000. For the last 10 games of the year, we'll give you $1,000. And he said, okay, that's fine. So he came back and played for us. And that was the year that we played Vancouver in the playoffs, and back and forth again. But we won the third game. We were up 2-1. And then they come over here and beat us 2, and then we went back there. They beat us 3-2. They come back and we beat them. We went for the 7th game in Vancouver. And it was a tough game. You know, it was a very close game. We're winning 8-5 with about 5 minutes to go. And that goddamn Barbie Marsh fired 2 into the top corner. It's now 8-7. And Barber, I think, scored, and it's 8-all. You know, now we're into overtime. But just before we went into overtime, when it was 8-all, we faced off, and Chisholm got the ball and ran down and goddamn near scored. Norman stopped him. So we went into overtime, and Biondo got a penalty just at the last few seconds of the regular game. He got a penalty. So anyway, we're shorthanded, but we managed to shut them down. And about 6 or 7 minutes in, Biondo, like, he was a great offensive player, but he said, I tried checking once and I didn't like it, you know. So that was the way he was. So he's hanging out, coming back, and Barkley intercepts the ball and feeds it to him, and he goes down and scores. Now, you had to play 10 minutes. So now we're up 9-8. And then Billy Job goes down and fires one in. And then he goes down and fires another one in.
Sub shot?
Yeah. And then Ken Audie got another goal. We beat them 13-9.
Wow.
So that was the year that we went back east, and we picked up Bobby Allen and John Servey. We tried to get Bill Chisholm to come. Bill said, no, he was a Burrard. He wasn't going to play for no Salmon Belly team. So we went back there and we beat Brampton 4 straight. They had a new team every night. We said, as long as they're from the east, we don't care. You can put anybody on the floor. So anyway, we won the Mann Cup in 62. 63, Vancouver beat us out again, beat us out in 64. 65, it was when the Coquitlam team came in. And Nanaimo wanted $2,000 for travel to come over to the mainland. And we said, no, we'll give you $1,000. No, they were going to want it 2. So they went out of the league. So now we got a 3-team league. We got to get another team.
This league is the Intercity Lacrosse League you're
Intercity
talking about?
Lacrosse
the predecessor to the
Yeah.
Western Lacrosse
Right.
Association.
So anyway, a bunch of the old Adnacks, the 39 Adnacks, Johnny Douglas, Ralph Douglas, Bob Lee, all these guys got together. Tommy Gordon got them together, and they made a presentation. They wanted to put a team in called the Coquitlam Adnacks, but they didn't want to be a team that didn't win a game. They wanted some conditions. So we agreed we would give them 3 players off each team: Victoria, Vancouver, and ourselves. And we said, take any 3 players. Well, the first guy they went to was Biondo. But he was down in Portland at the time, so he was kind of ending his lacrosse career. He'd played a couple of games for us later on. But they took, off us, they took Barkley, Stewart, Mike Gates, who was a great player, and they got one other player. They took 4 of our players anyway.
Was it Ken Audie?
No, Kenny came later. He didn't go that year.
Okay.
Yeah, he came, played for him later, and then came back to us in 68. So anyway, Vancouver said, no, you're not taking any 3 of ours. We'll tell you who you're going to take. Well, they signed Gimple up to be the playing coach, and they got Alec Carey to go, and they got one other player, I forget his name, and then Victoria sent, there was a few mainland players had been playing in Victoria, so they came to the Adnacks.
They're happy to come back.
They were
to the mainland.
happy to come back. So the Adnacks had a reasonably good year, and they went into the playoffs we won the league again with our team. brought a bunch of kids up from the junior team, Mac Tyler, and Tommy Korchuk, and Bobby Parent, and Doug was the coach. We'd had a meeting and the players wanted to change in the coach. Byford coached up to that point. So anyway, they get in and they end up third. So they're going to play Vancouver in the playoffs. And again, it's a 3 out of 5, and it's a game back and forth. It's tied 2-2 in Vancouver, and I'll be damned if Adanacs didn't beat them in the 5th game. So on the way back from Clearsdale that night, I said to ours in the car, I said, Adanacs just won the Mann Cup for us, because I wasn't sure we could beat Vancouver. You know?
They had a very strong team, the Carlins.
Yeah. So anyway, the Brooklyn team comes out. And up to this point, we had won 12 Mann Cup games, 12 straight. We'd beat Switsons, Peterborough, and Brampton. So we played the first game, and by this time, I'm the general manager. Harry had stepped down. I was the general manager, and Bill Armstrong was the team manager. And we played the first game, and we beat them 13-7. I thought, oh, Jesus, here we go again, you know, another one of these series. And I'm looking at the bottom line. I'm wanting to get some money to pay.
You wanted to play a number of games and make them great games so they get some fans out.
So anyway, the second game, they beat us in overtime. A great game, but they beat us in overtime. So now it's 1-1. So I'm happy now. Well, the third game, they beat us 13-7. We're down 2-1 now, you know. The third game, they beat us about 12-8. Now it's 3-1. I thought, holy Jesus, this wasn't supposed to happen, you know. So anyway, the 5th game, no, we were down 3-1. That was it. The 5th game, we beat them 8-7. It was a really tough game. And I can remember we had a fellow on our team named Rudy Reisinger, who had great speed, but could never find the net, you know. But he's a great kid. And he got into a hassle with one of the Brooklyn players. The guy did him wrong somehow, and Rudy turned around and slashed him, you know, and got a penalty. And I remember Billy Wilkes saying, Jesus, Rudy, don't do that. This time of the game, he says, no goddamn asshole's going to do that to me, he said. So we beat them 8-7. Turned out at the time there was a beer strike in BC, and you couldn't get any beer. We had an inn with the Russell Hotel, so we could get our beer, but the team was staying, the other team was staying there, and they gave them the room downstairs, so all they had was hard liquor. And now they're drinking the hard liquor for about 10 days. And we play the 6th game, and we just blew them out, you know. And then we blew them out the 2nd game. They didn't have anything left. So that was my most satisfying Mann Cup, because it was the least talented that won, you know.
You had some pretty good players in that 65 team. Cliff Sepka was still playing.
He was.
But you had another player, which we should talk about, because there's an interesting story, I think, with him. It's Paul Parnell. Maybe tell the story of the Parnell acquisition.
Well, Paul came out with Peterborough in '59, and he was a junior pickup. And he met Joan, his present wife, and the next thing you know, she's back there and they get married. Well, she doesn't want to live in Peterborough. So he comes out here, and he talked to me, as a matter of fact, and wanted to come play for us. And I said, well, Jesus, Paul, we're pretty stacked, you know. We got a lot of players here. Why don't you go to Victoria? They're having trouble trying to, because we beat Victoria about 20 straight at one point, I think. So anyway, he goes over to Victoria, and he stays there 1 year. They get him a job, and Paul's a worker, always was a worker. But Joan wanted to come back to New West. So we got to try and get him to transfer over. Well, we could have got him fairly easy, because they'd taken Severson and Browning and Landis and who else did they take?
Rio Jerome, maybe? I don't know.
No, Rio Jerome never went there. But they'd taken a lot of our players, so it was just a matter of filling out the transfer form and getting them over. But in the meantime, Victoria wanted $250 for him. So we gave him $250, And I remember him coming to our first practice, Paul did. He was just hitting everybody. Boy, he was going to make our team one way or the other.
And that was a tough team to make. You had a great junior team coming up.
Oh, yeah. It was
veterans.
it was a tough team to make, and he made it. I remind him up to this day that he cost us $250, and I think we overpaid for you. But anyway, where the hell were we now?
Oh, I just said we're going back in time. We talked about the 65-man cup, and that
Oh
was
yeah, the
satisfying
65,
for you.
and it was such a satisfying win, you know. And 66, I don't know what happened to the team in 56. We were playing Vancouver in the finals. We had the big fire at the
Rainier.
Rainier, and they had to cancel the game.
You had the Vancouver firefighters fighting and the New Westminster
Yeah.
firefighters. Nobody left to play.
Nobody left to play, and it was supposed to be our home game. So the first game Vancouver had won, and so when we got to revisit the second game, they move it back to Vancouver again. And I said, well, that's not right. Should be our home game. Well, the arena wasn't available or something. So we go to Vancouver, we get beat. They come back here, we get beat too. So Vancouver went back for the Mann Cup that year and picked up Shuttleworth and Parnell, but they still got beat by Peterborough. Anyway, by this time, I'd spent a hell of a lot of time with the team. Jesus, I sometimes look back on it, I spent too much time, you know. And I had a young family at the time, and one night the wife says, you know, nobody cares but you. You're the only one who cares whether they win or not. So I thought, well, it's time for me to step down because I'd become a fourth vice president of the Canadian Lacrosse Association at the time. So I stepped down, and Bill Armstrong took over as the manager, and that was the year they put the new floor in Queen's Park, which was not, you know, they had to play in Richmond and play in Surrey, and it was a bad year. The only year they didn't make the playoffs. So in '68, all these kids came up, Goss, Winzowski, Benny, Luthwaite, and they just barely made the playoffs. They had to win the final game in Nanaimo to get into the playoffs.
This is for the World Championship, I think they called it in '68.
'68.
They opted out of the Canadian
the WLA.
WLA, and they're now.
Yeah, they played 4 games back east, and the teams east come out here and played 4 games. So it was a great year for lacrosse. And prior to that, they played again Vancouver in the finals, and beat them in 6 games. I think really a tough series that was. And then now comes Jim Bishop with his Detroit team. And I could never figure out why he brought one goalie with him.
Is that a fact?
Merv Marshall.
Merv Marshall.
Merv Marshall was their goalie, and he was a good goalie.
Yeah.
They brought him out, but they never brought a backup. So they had to get a backup. So Merv Schweitzer was nominated as the backup. Well, our guys told Merv, if you ever go into the goal, we'll kill you, you know. So anyway, they beat Vancouver out in a real tough series on a Saturday night, and they had to play on Monday. Well, Bishop's Detroit team beat them easy on the Monday. Well, now the series is on, you know, and they won the next couple of games. Detroit won 1 more, but the 6th game, we were up 3-2, and it was getting close to the end of the game, and Cliff Seppi got a breakaway. And Cliff was not the speediest player, but he is one of the smartest that ever played the game, and he's flying down the floor. And just as he goes to shoot, the guy nailed him, knocked him flying. He shot and scored, you know. Well, geez, it just brought
Kind of a Bobby Orr moment.
Oh, God, it was, you know. I told him after the game, Cliff, you might as well retire. You'll never duplicate what you've just done, you know. So Cliff Sepka took over coaching the '69 team. By that time, this world thing had folded, and they were just back to the WLA again. And they had all these kids. So in '69, they won the league again, went back east, and I'm sure Wayne Goss told you about the games with Peterborough back there. Went to 7 games, and I think they're up 8-7 with a few minutes to go, and somebody chops Wayne for about, I don't know how many stitches.
Yeah.
They ended up Peterborough won anyway. And the Sandbellies had by far the better team. So anyway, 1970 comes along, and they got all these guys again, and Peterborough's coming out here again, you know, to play. Well, the Sandbellies wiped them 4 straight. They had a message they were going to send to them, and Peterborough had a good team. You know, they had Cy Coombs and Bobby Allen and all those guys. And then in '71, for some reason, some of the guys must have quit. By this time, I was in the CLA, but I still hung around a bit. And they weren't supposed to beat the Adanacs, though. The Adanacs were supposed to win. They had the best team that year. They won the league and everything. But the Sandbellies beat them out. So they come back east. Yeah, I'm president of the CLA at that time, you know. And they go to Brampton. And of course, in about the first period, another one of the Eastern guys chops Goss down, chops his head open, so he's just a shell of himself after that. Brampton beat them 4 straight. You know, it was no contest. And
it wouldn't make you happy as the president of the CLA. You've got a 4-game sweep. No good.
That was '71. And '72, of course, Brampton is back out here. Well, you know what the Sandbellies did to Brampton in '72. They took them 4 straight. And then '73, I think Vancouver were the team that was in the Mann Cup in '73, but they didn't win it anyway. In '74, the Sandbellies are back and they win again. They win the Mann Cup in '74. '75, Vancouver won out here. In '76, the Sandbellies won and they went back east. And that was the first time a team had won since '62, since we were back there, won in '62.
Very tough to win in the East when you're a Western team out there.
They won in 7 back there. And they had a couple of Peterborough players on the Sandbelly team. They'd come out here for the summer. We're trying to get a couple of them now to come out this year, by the way.
Sure. Is that J.J. Johnston and
Jan McGee, J.J. Johnson, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, they won back there in '76. And then they had a kind of a lull again for the next 4 or 5 years until '71.
81.
No, '91.
Oh, so yeah.
'91. They went '76, they went to '81. They won 3 Mann Cups in the '80s.
They won the '81 Mann Cup. That was Goss's last year.
Goss got the Mike Kelly.
That's right.
And then they won in '84 again, and they won in '89. In the meantime, I think Vancouver was winning. And then in '91, they won again. And my son was coaching that year.
Jack Fulton Jr.
Yeah, he was coaching. And we had a banquet at the Legion. And the year before, in '90, Brampton had beaten the Sandbellies and beat them quite handily. So we had this banquet, and I had to get up and say a few words. And I said, well, I hope you guys enjoy your stay out here because it's going to be short. And I was right. We beat them 4 straight. But that's the last time the Sandbellies have won the Mann Cup.
Why is that? Talk about, I know it's not due to the lack of effort from the team or anything like that, but there's some other factors that are contributory to why perhaps they haven't quite got to the won that championship again. Could you talk about that a bit?
Well, there's a couple of good reasons. The one, we were beating Brooklyn 3-0. 3-0 in the Mann Cup. We're up, and of course, we're counting on the Mann Cup. That's for sure. And Brooklyn had a goalie. I forget his name, but he was pretty good. But he made the statement that don't count us out yet. We're coming back. You know. Well, they beat us 1, 2, 3 games. We go to the 4th game. The 7th game, and the game is tied with less than a minute to go. And the ball's bouncing around in the crease, and Eric Cowson kicks it, and he kicks it into our own goal.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that was it. That was
very unfortunate.
That was the loss there. And, of course, we can't forget the one that happened here just 2011, I think, when, you know, we got one ahead, It's a 7-game series. We're one ahead, winning by 8-7, I think. We got the ball. There's a minute to go, and they got a penalty. Well, shit, right away. They just have to run around with the ball for 30 seconds, and we've got the Mann Cup. Well, they give the ball to Geitch, and Geitch was a great player, but he always ran into trouble. Every time we were a man short and you give him the ball, he'd run down the center, they'd take the ball off him. So he gets the ball at center. After having a timeout and being able to talk about it, they wanted to give it to one of the other kids, and he didn't want to take it for some reason. He said that he was too tired. He didn't want the ball. But Geitz took it, and the first thing he did was run down behind our goal. Well, they send 2 guys on him, and he runs up the wrong side to start with. They take the ball off him. The guy that gets the ball hasn't got a goal all year, goes in and scores, ties the game up. And then in overtime, they beat us by 1 goal. So that was the last real close. We went back east, I think in 2012. We won 2 games in Peterborough. Could have won there. We had a good team.
The momentum kind of shifted. It used to be maybe back in the 50s and 60s, the West was a lot stronger.
BC, yeah.
And it started to change, and now it's stayed. The East is the sort of the powerhouse, the people to beat back there. Bigger populations,
well,
fewer teams.
Jim Bishop made the statement once. He said, the West have been winning, but we'll bury them. We got so many power players playing now. And he was right. And they haven't been able to win a Mann Cup since '91, you know.
What's your position on there's what, 7 teams in the WLA now, and
yeah.
7 or 8 junior teams. Some people think maybe that's too many. You can't support that many teams. Maybe it's 4 senior teams and better players on those 4 teams. That you just can't support it. The population isn't what you have in Ontario.
Yeah, Nanaimo haven't been in the playoffs for I don't know how many years, you know. Langley they're nothing. They don't draw any fans. They don't do anything. They'd be best to get, like when we had 4 teams, one year we played 32 games, 16 home and 16 away. And that's we come up with the bright idea that we'd play Vancouver 16 times because we'd save on the travel. This is the deal that we peddled them. But we knew we'd get more fans, so we'd play 8 home and 8 away. Well, Victoria only took that for 1 year, and they wanted to go back to the old system. So, but there's too many players, too many teams. There should be at the most 5 teams, and even the junior teams, some of them are never competitive. You know.
It's good. It's good for, you know, participation in the sport,
for
I guess.
recreation.
But it's not good at the top end for to have really competitive teams. You need fewer teams.
Well, what happens a lot of times with the Eastern teams, they load up when a Mann Cup is back there. You know, they move Dawson over to Peterborough, or they move Tavares there. They move all their real top players, and they let them do this. Out here, they're so busy fighting amongst themselves, they're not giving up anything. You know, they should try and do that like before the deadline, July the 1st. If a team sees they're not going anywhere, why not let their player go and let them come back the next year? But that's just the way it is. So
let's talk about, go back a little bit and talk about you and the CLA, but let maybe start with the Canadian Lacrosse Hall of Fame. We're here today. You and Harry McKnight were instrumental in getting this started. Talk about the impetus. Why were you thinking that way? How did that come about?
Well, I think the CLA had put out feelers for presentations to have a Mann Cup. So Harry and I talked about it. When we ran the team, 2 of us ran the team. Now we got, I don't know, 20 directors, and we got all kinds of people. The 2 of us ran it. We never had any, we made all the decisions. It's the way we wanted it, you know. And, anyway, we thought, well, we'll make a presentation. So we go back east to the CLA, we make a presentation, and they award it to us. So we come back here, well, where are we going to have it?
You're talking about a presentation about the Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame.
But why did you think you needed one?
Well, I guess at the time we thought it was a good idea. Westminster was a hotbed of lacrosse, you know, and maybe they didn't get very many other presentations. But anyway, they award it to us. We come back. They didn't do it right away. Now, where are we going to have it? Well, we got no place to have it. It ended up going into that historic house on Royal Avenue.
Irving House?
In the basement.
Was it?
Yeah, that's where it started. So we started putting some pressure on the city that we had to have a decent place. So they eventually gave us the place over there by the swimming pool, which was good.
The Canada Games Pool.
Canada Games Pool, yeah. And Tommy Gordon was the commissioner at the time, and he was the first chairman of the Hall of Fame. And Tommy, over the years, he kind of groomed me to take over his jobs, you know. So he hung around as the chairman for a few years, and then I took over. But then we started collecting all the stuff. And we never had any money, but we had a guy at the fire hall who could make nice cases, so he made us a bunch of cases. And we put his name up on the board telling him that he donated this, and we collected a bunch of stuff and got the things up with the bios of all the players. I personally like that. You know, I'm one of the ones, I don't agree with this Hall of Fame. I like the old one.
I know lots of people like it because there's lots of stuff to see.
There was lots of stuff to see.
It was very informal.
Yeah, you know, you had Bishop's 8 or 7 Minnow Cups up there, and
who had the idea for the big brass plaques that had the inductee names on them?
Oh, I guess that was a combination, and that was expensive.
I bet.
You know, we paid a lot of money for that. And I forget now where we used to get our money, but we used to get it from somewhere. We always got $500 out of the city, but that was not big dollars, you know.
You didn't always get along with the city back in the 50s when you made the transition. You're going to be the O'Keeffes. There was some pushback from the city.
Well, we'd made a deal with the city when in 59, 58, we said, look, you guys are only getting about $130 through your gate as your share of the gate, because they used to get 33%. Well, there was no fans. There was 200 or 300 fans there. We'll guarantee you $150 a night. Oh, well, they thought that was great. So we signed a deal, $150 a night, you know. Well, that's when we jacked the price up immediately from 50 cents to $1. And then we went around selling season's tickets. I went to every business on the north side of Columbia Street, and I sold a season ticket to every business there.
Wow.
And what we had to do, you see, we only paid for the tickets they turned in. So at the end of the year, we ended up with $2,800. People hadn't used their tickets, so that was a bonus right there. Another one of our little scams that we used to pull. So anyway, that's the way it started out. And,
who covered the south part of Columbia Street? Was that Harry?
Harry was more a talker. He wasn't the guy to do the grunt work, you know.
Okay.
He was a great promoter, and we worked well together. Not many guys could work with Harry because he was very aggressive, you know. But I understood him a little bit, and I knew how much he did. So we got along well until about 1964, when his wife had passed away, and he got a new honey. He was spending more time with her than he was with the lacrosse team. So
unthinkable.
So he backed out anyway after 64, and that's when I took over as general manager. But
so tell us about your involvement with the CLA. You were involved with that for a long time.
Well, I started out as the fourth, what do they call him?
Vice president or fourth director?
Fourth vice president, that's right. And then we were at a meeting once, and I could see this. Well, am I going to go to the fourth for 2 years, then 2 years to the third, and then the first? I said, I'm not going to operate that way. So we had a meeting, and I said, well, I'm going to run for the first vice president. So I ran, and I got elected, you know. So I did the first vice president for a year, and then I ran for the president. Well, I ran against a guy named Eric Caruso from back east, and I was elected president in I guess it would be about 1970 to 72. And that was the year in 74. That was the year we're starting to explode lacrosse. We were getting a lot more younger guys playing, young kids playing all over. You know, it was a lot of growth at that time. So I did my 2 years, then I stepped down, and then we took the team to Australia for the World Championship. And we worked out, boy, we worked the guys out here. We were the best conditioned team you ever seen when we got to Melbourne.
1967?
No, 1974.
Oh, 74.
74. And what happened was when we went there, we had to play a few exhibition games, and the Australian team would go and watch us. And we were box players, we were field players, and they were laughing at us. Look at these guys, you know. Well, we played Australia in the first game, and we got ahead about 5 goals on them. Then we just ran around with the ball. There was no 30-second rule. So we beat them handily. Well, the next game, by now our players are starting to go down a little bit. They're partying quite a bit. You know, you couldn't control them. You know, they were living in billets and everything. You know, they were all, oh geez, it was quite a scene. But anyway, next time we're playing the Americans, and they knew what they were doing. And shit, they beat us easy, you know. So then they beat Australia, and then the final game we were playing England. And by this team, our guys didn't have it at all. Even the Englishmen beat us. So that was the end of it. We were the worst conditioned team coming home. I tell you, the guys had a great party, but it wasn't a job for a manager.
When did your time with the CLA end? Was that?
It ended in 72. But then they asked me to come back and be the manager of the team in 74. Mm. And then by that time I was a little bit higher up in the fire hall, and I had a little more responsibilities. So I kind of stepped away for about 5 or 6 years. And then one day I get a phone call from Casey Cook, and he said, I'd like you to come back and be on the board and just be an advisor. I said, oh, an advisor, what's that? Well, you know, well, that was the biggest mistake I made. I was an advisor, all right.
The biggest of many mistakes.
I've been there ever since.
You're talking about the Sam Valley's Alumni Society.
No, well, no, I'm talking about the Sam Valley lacrosse team.
Oh, the team? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, how the alumni came about, that's another story. Jack Bionda died, went in for the knee operations, and shit, he said, I'm not going to do one and then the other. I'm getting both done at the same time, you know. Well, you know what happened. He got an embolism and died. So we're going to recognize him out here. So we put together a group. We're going to have a big memorial service at the Elks Club, and we got, oh geez, there must have been 300 people there. And after it was over, we said, you know, it's a shame that this is the only time we meet. Maybe we should start an alumni. So we called a meeting. 30 guys turn up, alumni, you know, and we start putting things together. As things turn out, they gradually drop away. The alumni just drop away. And pretty soon there's only about 4 or 5 of us operating for a while. And so I took over as chairman. I took over from Fred Sparks, who was a school teacher in town here. He did a good job and kept the thing together. And then we thought we were going to have a golf tournament to raise some money. So we started our golf tournament out at Poppy Estates, and we're going to have our 16th one this year. And we've managed to raise a fair few dollars, you know, and it's always successful. Everybody enjoys themselves. So anyway, I had the alumni job for about 5 years, and I said, it's time somebody else took over. So we brought in somebody else. And I tried to guide him, but it didn't work. He just didn't pan out, and I won't mention his name. But anyway, we had to get rid of him, so I had to come back and run again. So that's where I am now. I'm the chairman of the alumni again. But I told them, and my son had told me, he worked at Scott Paper Kruger, had a very responsible job, and I said, you should get on the alumni and help out a little bit. And he said, well, when I retire, I will. So he retired about 3 years ago, so I said to him here about a year ago, It's time you got on the alumni. You promised. He said, okay, I'll come. So he come. So he's the vice chairman. So I told him at the meeting, I don't know whether you were there or not, and I said, this is my last year as chairman. So you know who your next chairman's going to be.
Short grooming period.
A short grooming period. But the girls are putting on a spirit night. You've been to the spirit nights. Did you get your ticket yet?
I got a feeling I'm going to have it after today.
I don't have one with me.
I'll be hearing about it, I'm sure.
Yeah. And they do a good job. And they're having their third this March the 8th. And the funds from there, it's basically the alumni that do it, but the funds go to the team. We give them the team so that they got the expenses.
There's some scholarships and things like that.
We give away
money.
5 scholarships every year. We help out players maybe down on their luck a little bit. We've helped out a few of the players, give them money. Travel, we help out all the minors. If it's out of province travel, we pick up the tab for that. So it's a good organization, and you're not meeting every week. We meet 3 times a year. It's the golf club is the main thing, and then it's distributing the money, which there's 3 of us distribute it, and we just get together and say, yeah, we can give $500 without calling a meeting. So that's what we do.
Yeah.
And,
are there any other lacrosse organization alumni that you're aware of in Canada, or is it a unique?
Victoria. The guy from Victoria phoned me up and wanted to know all about it. So I gave him all the details, and they've been very successful. They've got a lot more members than we got, as a matter of fact, now.
Is that right?
So they're doing very well, yeah.
I want to ask you about the fire department. You started with them in what year with the fire department?
1950.
1950.
Yeah.
And you were, what position were you? Just a...
Well, you start out on the low, cleaning the toilets to start with.
Not that low.
Yeah, sure.
Come
Somebody
on.
had to clean them.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah. No, it was our job to do that and tend the fire. We had a coal-burning furnace there. We had to...
In 50, you had a coal-burning furnace.
Yes.
Well, I guess that's about right.
Yeah, well, that's when we were down on Carnarvon Street. When we moved up to Royal Avenue, we had the gas. So it was only, I was only down there for about 15 months on Carnarvon Street.
Now, you'd come out of the Second World War. You were in the Merchant Marine. You had your master's ticket, I think, and you got on with the fire department shortly after the war in 1950. You started out where you said you progressed through the ranks a bit, though. Tell us about that.
Well, you start out and you spend your first at least 15 years being a fireman. You become a driver, you on the back of the truck, and then you're the driver, and then you become, now they're lieutenants. We used to just go from driver to captain, and you're the captain for 10 years, and then you got to write the exams for the assistant chiefs. And I wrote the exam for the assistant chief in 1975, and I got the job. And when you're assistant chief, you're in charge of a shift. There's 4 of them. So you were in charge of the shift. Then in 79, the chief's job came up, and the fellow who eventually got the job, John McCallum, there was a lot of seniority went on too, and there was a lot of things that I wouldn't want to talk about went on, but I didn't get the job. I got the deputy's job, which was fine because I like dealing with the guys. The chief is kind of off in the corner office, and the deputy, he really runs the fire department. And I ran it for 7 years, so I enjoyed that part of the job. And I'm still friends with most of the guys since. I used to enjoy when the union would come in with a grievance, and I'd listen to it, and I'd say, yeah, all right, I'll think about it, and I'll get back to you. Well, I'd get back to them in a couple of days, so sometimes they'd forgotten what they were in for to start with. But we always managed to work it out, and I had a good relationship with them. So.
Did you get to the chief's job?
No, never did, no.
Deputy chief.
I did it for a year when he had both his hips done, so I did the chief's job for a year.
What year did you retire from the fire department?
86.
86.
Yeah.
So that's a 36-year career.
Yeah.
The city. Now, of course, New Westminster and the fire department and the police department and other city departments through the years, starting probably way back in 1930s, I guess. You know, had employed a lot of lacrosse players through the years, legitimately. So there's a real affinity between the fire department in particular and the Sand Bellies. Maybe talk about that a little bit, how that all came about.
Well, you know, like the fire department it's a team effort. You know, you're depending on the other guy all the time, and they tend to hire to athletes, and not only that, we had an in with the city too. You know, I used to cultivate Ken Wright, who was an alderman, and a bunch of them, and we had a situation where Doug McCrory, his dad was a fireman, and he wasn't the brightest guy in the world, and he wrote a letter to the council and said the chief was a knothead and didn't sign it. So anyway, what they did, they had him write an essay. So he wrote an essay, and they could tell by the writing it was him, so they fired him. Well, Doug, we were trying to get Doug on the fire department, and Doug was the most accomplished guy. He could do everything. We sent him to Vancouver to be tested for an assistant chief. They said, this guy shouldn't be in the fire department. He should be an engineer. He's so clever, you know. Well, because his dad had been in the fire department and got fired, they wouldn't consider him. So I went to Ken Wright, and I said, this isn't right. You know, this guy's, you know, he's an upright citizen. He's worked at Scott Paper for 15 years or 10 years. At least give him a chance. Let him write the exam. Well, he wrote the exam. Well, shit, he was head and shoulders above everybody. So they hired him. But then we used to, you know, we got Billy Wilkes on, we got Wayne Goss on, we got several.
Wayne Shuttleworth.
Shuttleworth, we got him on, yeah.
Bill Wilkes.
Yeah, and there were 7 of us at one time. Les Norman.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that was
The
another
goalie.
Story. Every time he knocked at my door, when I go, it was Les and his wife. Have you heard anything? Yeah, it got him to go and take a driver. Got to teach him how to drive a truck. Well, he finally got hired, and he was the biggest pain in the ass I had one all the time. It was there because he was a goalie, you know.
That's not fair.
Well, Dwight's not a goalie. He was an out guy. He was passing the ball out all the time.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I think that covers it. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you'd like to talk about a little bit?
Just that, Jesus, every time we go to our wind-up banquets, I say, look, I'm not going to be around forever. We got to win another Mann Cup. And I think that this coming year, we maybe have a good chance. I mean, we got the Salmon Belly Warriors playing in Vancouver. I think there's 7 of them off our team. And they're all offensive players. We got to
Logan Shush and Mitch Jones and others. Jordan McBride.
Jordan McBride, Keegan Ball, he's coming back this year. There's a whole raft of them anyway. And we're going to be chasing Crowley again, so hopefully this would be the year. I would like it to be the year, but you know, I got 3 jobs I do. I sell program ads, I sell dinner tickets, and I sell sweater sponsors. And that's what I do. And I say, look, I'm not doing anything else. You guys can run the rest of it. So, you know, here I am, what, 90, going on 93, and I'm still doing it. They say, well, don't you think it's about time you quit? And I said, well, it keeps me alive. You know, I enjoy doing it. I've tried to pass some of my programs over to Carol Goss one year, and she went around and they all said, well, where's Jack? You know, so I took them back again next year.
You've spoiled the position here. Everyone expects you.
Yeah,
You've done so much yeoman service for the city, for the game of lacrosse in New Westminster, nationally. Thank you for that. And I think in terms of the Sand Bellies winning again, you're not the only one by far that wants to see another Mann Cup here, the 25th. Hopefully we'll get there soon. There's one other thing that you do, though, religiously. You're at all the games.
Never miss them, junior and senior.
You're still very interested in what's going on the floor, and you're not there passively. You know what's happening.
No, I know when the coach puts the wrong guys out on the floor. You know, what
Yeah.
the hell they got that guy? They got 2 left-handers out there now.
And everybody listens to you still. They do.
I think they think I'm a pain in the ass sometimes, but
Oh, I don't
that's
think,
the way it goes.
I don't think anybody thinks that. So thank you for everything you've done, and thanks for being here at the Canadian Lacrosse Hall of Fame today. It's a real pleasure chatting with you.
Okay, Bruce, thanks for inviting me, and I enjoyed our little conversation.